Hi everyone, Titus here for another Unreal Engine tutorial, and in this video I'll show you how to create a simple scanning mechanic that shows object descriptions to the player. Let's not waste any time and just jump right into it. Alright, so I have a basic setup of a drone here, so we can basically start the map, I can take over the drone, fly around, and then we're basically going to add a mechanic where the drone can scan objects. So let's go ahead and create a scannable object class. So let's go to our example folder. We'll right click and create a new blueprint. We'll select type actor and we can call this BP underscore maybe scannable object. And then we will double click to open that up. And then under the construction script, what we're going to do is we'll pull off here and do a add static mesh component. And then we have to right click and split the structure pin here. Otherwise it won't compile because it'll need a transform. So we'll just leave the defaults, that should be fine. And after that we want to set the static mesh. So we're basically adding the component. This actually populates what static mesh you want to fill in there. And then afterwards we might want to also add a material. So we'll do set material. Now, when we add the static mesh component, it has a return value. We can actually pass this into the target for the set static mesh, and we can also pass this in for the target for the material. And then for the new static mesh, what we want to do is right click and promote it to a variable, and we'll call this just our new mesh. And we're going to hit the little eyeball, or you can click the little checkbox for instance editable, so we can set that in the editor. And then same thing with the material, we'll just promote to a variable. We'll call this new material. And then we'll hit the little eyeball, or you can check the little box. And that's, there's one other thing we'll want to add actually. We can go to the variables, we'll hit the little plus sign, and we'll just call this maybe something like description. And then we will set that to be a string, compile, and I'm going to check the box for instance editable because we will set this in the world outliner. And that's kind of it for this. So if we save, we can open up our blueprint and kind of drag it somewhere in the world. And then what you can do is for the new mesh, I don't think I have too many objects here, but let's do a cylinder. And then I'll just place that like maybe right there. I think for the material, I'll leave it alone. But for the description, let's just grab something pre-configured here. Paste that in there. And then let's get a couple of them actually. So then I can hold the Alt key. We'll drag off, we'll create another one. Maybe move this over here. And let's make this a ramp. And then we'll use a different description for that one. So we'll delete what we have there. Paste in that. And I think that'll be good starting off. All right, so now obviously we have our objects, we can go into them. I can't really interact or do anything, I just kind of bump into them. So now we need to basically kind of create a way to actually scan. So we'll need to set up logic on the drone blueprint, but we also need to set up input controls to actually map some type of keyboard action or gamepad action that allows us to scan. So we'll start with the input, I think, because that'll be easier. I am using the third person template, so I'm going to go in the third person folder. There is a predefined input folder with an input mapping context file as well as some actions. So if you're using any of the templates that'll come with it, if you're not, under the input, you can create your input actions and your input mapping context here. So I'm going to go into actions and I'm going to create a new input action called IA underscore scan. I'm going to leave the defaults, which is just a Boolean true false. That'll work fine. And I'm going to open up the input mapping context file. And then I'm going to add a new mapping, which you see drops down to the bottom here. And I'm going to assign that to use the IA underscore scan we just created. Now that I have that mapped, we can assign basically key bindings to it. So whatever you want to use. For this prototype, we'll just use the spacebar. I think is good enough. And then we'll just save, and that's basically it. You can add as many input or key bindings you want for that particular action, and then when the player uses any of those key bindings, it'll fire off the event, and then whatever code you have tied to that event will run. But let's actually open up the drone blueprint here, because this is going to be where we do kind of the majority of the code. Now, when you're working with input actions, you may already be aware, but there is an event receive controller changed. So in your player pawn, or even if you're doing AIs have controllers as well, you can call this event and then do a cast to the player controller, use the enhanced input local player subsystem, and then call into the mapping context, which is where we assign that IMC default, which was this file right here. So this is how you bind the details from this file into this blueprint, which is our drone blueprint. So you can see that right here. Hopefully that made sense. But let's find an empty space in the graph, and let's just call our scan event, so IA_scan. Now we don't want to use triggered, because that'll fire multiple times on a press. I instead want to use started. So when I start, we can do a line trace by channel. And what this does is it fires off a raycast in a particular direction. And then whatever it hits, it can return details based on what it hit. And I think that's a nice, cheap, and easy way to implement a scan mechanic. So you can do a few different ways. You can do like an overlap, like create a overlap collider that maybe turns it on and off and checks whatever overlaps when it happens. That's another way to do it. But I think for this prototype, we'll do a line trace. Now we need to figure out the start and end position. We are using a camera on this blueprint. So basically, I think we can fire the raycast out from where the camera is. And I think that'll probably work. So let's drag the camera out. And we're going to need two things from the camera. We need to get the world location. And we also want to get the world rotation. So basically, where is the camera in the world, and where is the camera looking? So where the camera is in the world, we can use as the start position. Where the camera's looking, we can pull off and get the forward vector. And then from the forward vector, we can multiply. And then I want to right click, convert this to a float. I think single precision will be just fine. And then I'm going to right click and promote it to a variable. And we can maybe call this our scan distance. How far do we want to look for, or scan basically. So how far do you want the player to be able to scan objects from? I think starting off, I'll just do 1500 units. I think that'll work just fine. And then what we can do is on the world location, we can add that to this forward rotation and then put that as the end channel. So basically we're taking our current location, we're finding the forward vector from the rotation. So find where the camera's rotated and then get the forward vector, multiply that by whatever your scan distance, and then add that to the original world location vector. So it basically just puts it in front of it. So hopefully that made sense. And then we can see what this is doing. So draw debug type, let's do persistent so we can see what's going on. We obviously wouldn't keep it that way, but we can pull this into a break and we can see all the data you can get from this. And let's just simply pull into a print string, and let's do the hit actor into the print string. And then we can kind of see what this looks like. So we'll compile, save here, take over the drone, and I can basically fire off a raycast. You see in the top left corner, it's a cube grid tool output. And then if I go over here and I fire off this, you see that's my BP scannable object. And then if I fire on this, it's a chamfer cube. And then fire on that, it's another scannable object. So I can just basically cruise around, fly in, shoot different things, and then get details based on what I hit. This is a very simple kind of dumbed down explanation of what's going on here, but Another more common example that you'll use stuff like this for is, of course, like guns. Like if you're doing an FPS, you're typically firing raycasts, and then you see what you're hit, and you can apply damage and do drops and all sorts of things. So, but yeah. All right, so that works great. But now we need to figure out how to actually get the scan mechanic working. So let's go back into the drone. We're gonna delete this. And I think what we can do is we'll wait on, yeah, I think we'll wait on that. So we'll drag off into a cast2 scannable object class. And then we can take the hit actor, pass it in here. And if it's true, we'll do a print string again. And as the scannable object, we can get the description, pass it in here. Now we can file save. And if I hit something else, nothing happens. But if I hit a scannable object, you can see I actually get the details from that scan. That works great. But as a print string, that's only somewhat interesting. Let's kind of actually get it to look a little decent. I think it'll be cool if maybe we create a widget and we basically pop the widget on screen with the text description. I think that'll look kind of neat. So we'll go back to our example folder, right click, we'll create a quick user interface called widget blueprint. Choose user widget, and I'm just going to give it WBP underscore scan HUD. And then double click to open that up. This is going to be a real simple widget, so we're just add a canvas panel, and then maybe I'll do an image, and then for the anchor I'm going to choose bottom left and then hold control so it is like a select, and I'll kind of just grab it and extend it out. And then under the brush, we will set the tint to be maybe a blue, and then we're going to reduce the alpha so it's kind of like see-through maybe. So maybe something like that. You don't have to get too finicky with it. And then we'll just add a simple text element. We're going to anchor that center left, and then we'll hold control, click it back, hold shift, click it back. That way it kind of centers out. And then I'm going to add in a text description so I can see how it's going to look. So I'll grab one here. And what I want to do is I want to use wrapping. So let's set the size for the X to be there. And then down at the bottom, there's auto wrap text. We'll check that. And let's maybe increase the Y position a bit. So we'll go maybe right about there. And I think that'll look good enough. Good enough for what we're doing here. All right, but now that's basically kind of a static widget. So what we would do is we want to make this editable. So we let's give it a good name. Maybe we call it our description. Yeah, why not? Description. And then we'll set it to is variable, compile, and then we can go to graph. We'll create a new event, add custom event. We'll call this maybe scan text. The scan text obviously needs an input, so we'll add an input on the left. We'll say new description. And we're passing in strings, so we want to make the data type a string. And then we have our description variable here. We can simply drag that into the graph. And we'll do a get and pull off, do set text. And then when this executes, you can just pass in the text here. It'll convert it and throw it on the HUD. And that'll work just fine. So we can go back to our drone, and when this is successful, we will create a widget. The widget we'll create is our scan HUD. We're gonna pull off the blue pin and do add to viewport. And then we want to pull off the blue pin again, because that gives us access to all the functions on the widget. And we created a function or an event called scan text. And then that takes in a new description, which we can just grab from our object, pass it in there. And now after we do that, we can maybe come into a simple delay. And then we'll do maybe 2 seconds. And then what we'll do is we'll pull off the blue pin one last time and search for remove from parent to delete the widget, because we no longer need it. And I think that'll work just fine. So if we compile and save, I can now take over this. If I shoot something that isn't an object, nothing happens. If I shoot this, you see I get my little HUD, and then it goes away. I can hit it multiple times, so we probably need to account for that. But we can just do like a Boolean check for that. But the other thing that might be fun is maybe you want to add like a scan effect. And maybe you want to wait or do like a little duration where it's actually scanning. I think that might be fun. We made this drone in a previous video, which it still has a leftover Niagara effect. So I'm just going to reuse that to keep it quick and easy. So I can drag that over here, and I'm just going to use set active. And we can pull into this, do a new activate. And then we'll come into a delay, and then we'll do 2 seconds. And then we'll do the rest of the logic. So now if I take over the drone and I scan something, you see I get a little scan effect, kind of goes away, does nothing. And then I come over here, do a little scan effect. Then it plays like a little description on the field or on the HUD. Come over here, do a little scan effect, and then you get something like that. So, all right, good people. I think we'll cut it here to keep it kind of short, but I hope you found some informative value in this topic that you can take into your own projects. But as always, thanks for watching. Consider subscribing, and we'll see you on the next one.